What's up, and welcome back to Interpreting Stars, where today we're bringing it back to the world of Star Trek with the 10th film in the series and final outing from the crew of the Next Generation is Star Trek Nemesis. Now, this film is often considered to be the worst Star Trek film that exists by a lot of people, whether you're a Trekkie or not. That's a feeling that was shared by me the first time that I saw it as well, as I had it rated as the second worst Star Trek movie. But upon rewatch, I can tell you that my rating has improved some. Not by much, mind you, but enough to switch around my rankings. And after I'm done with this marathon overall, I will be doing a quick ranking video to bring these 13 movies together to find out which one's the best of the best. So make sure that you don't miss that and subscribe. For now, let's talk about a movie with a bunch of people who are anything but limpid. Let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, limpid. Absolutely serene and untroubled. Star Trek Nemesis focuses on Picard and the rest of the crew of the Uss Enterprise as they are shuttling First Officer William T. Riker and Counselor Troy on their honeymoon after they've finally been married. Their vacation must be postponed, however, when they're sent on a mission that pits Picard against Picard? That's right, a young clone of himself. And this Picard isn't just and true, but rather he's evil, and he has a ship that contains a planet-killing weapon. Yeah, you heard that right. And no, evil Picard is not Darth Vader. That's preposterous. Lots to talk about here, and so little time. I did, however, want to talk about some of the positives here, because it's not without them. This is one of the only classic Star Trek films that had some pretty dang decent visuals. You can tell while watching these movies that they strive to get more and more explosive, forgetting that less is more. The James Bond series did the same thing with Pierce Brosnan when he took over. It was suddenly a blockbuster, and yeah, blockbusters are pretty in a certain light. They're exciting, absolutely, but if your series was originally based on human connection and philosophical discussions for years, then is what you end up with a part of the same linear story? For me, not really. I'm somewhere on the tail end of Season 2 at this point for Star Trek The Next Generation, and I can easily say that the show is better than the movies because they weren't trying to be something that they weren't, like Star Wars. Truthfully, I'm kind of worried about the Kelvin timeline at this point. I really am, but I do have hope for those because it's more of a reboot than anything, but we're getting off topic. Another thing that I liked about this movie is the fact that it has some really good ideas in its premise. Picard facing against a clone, I mean, there's a lot of potential there, given the fact that I love another movie where Patrick Stewart's character interacts with a younger version of himself, X-Men Days of Future Past. In either variation, you've got an actor that looks nothing like Patrick Stewart himself. In Star Trek Nemesis, you got Tom Hardy in one of his really early roles. Does he look like Patrick Stewart? No! Not even a little bit. But they at least gave him an explanation. They said there's been a lot of violence and bones breaking, so he doesn't exactly look the same because of that. So that alone is pretty cool, I'll admit. I also think structurally the film works a little bit better than some of the other Star Trek films because everybody on the Enterprise at some point in the movie had a duty that they had to fulfill. The last movie, for example, I felt like the cast was there, but they didn't have that much individual importance. They did here, at least somewhat. It's not a perfect movie, but it did have some things that I felt were approached better than the last movie, for example. And these are not things that you should ignore, because it's easy to overlook when you have some bad and even confusing parts, which this film definitely has. For the most part, I'd call this one of those unfortunately rare cases of a boring movie that has nonstop action, and even decent visuals. The main reason for that is because it has a very poor and confusing introduction that has something to do with politics and peace treaties, but even that doesn't have enough exposition to explain what exactly is happening, and why it's so important, or honestly, why Picard should care. Beyond that, you should know that, yeah, it's a clone of Picard, but do you really understand why they cloned him? I mean, really? I get the idea behind it that they cloned him so the clone could infiltrate Starfleet, but a lot of that feels like an overly complicated and cheap excuse for a Picard clone, meaning it ends up feeling more like a gimmick than anything else. Truthfully, if this was an episode of the TV show or something, it would have dialed down on the action for sure and made a lot more thought-provoking aspects on what this means now and what it could mean in the future in both a negative and positive way. And I guarantee it would have been one of the best episodes of the show. In fact, we've had something similar already in the first season of the show with Data. However, it's instead one of the worst movies in the series because it just wants to be explosive, violent, and action heavy all around, and it is, but for the most part, I was bored out of my mind. Let's talk about the final score for a second. From an unbiased technical vantage point, I can easily see where this film has improved from the other movies in terms of visuals. But visuals are not everything. Writing is also an important aspect, and it's probably the writing alone that hurt this movie the most. My unbiased score is relatively average at 72%, but given the fact that these Star Trek movies are all about entertainment, I'd have to say the fact that my boredom a majority of the time affected my bias. That score is 58%. Averaging out the two scores together, we come to the final rating of 65%. 65 out of 100 possible stars, granting the movie with a letter grade of D. So as you can see, if you've been paying attention during my marathon, this isn't my least rated Star Trek movie. It's nowhere near the highest, but a rewatch of the film has given me a little bit more appreciation on the movie as a whole. But let's hear your thoughts on Star Trek Nemesis in the comments section down below. Do you think this is the worst Star Trek film? And if not, which one do you think is the worst? As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, because there's always more like it coming out each and every single day. Hit the subscribe button and bell to be notified when I come out with my next Star Trek review, which should be J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, which came out in 2009. And until then, peace out!
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us.